Howdy and good morning. My name is Annie Crump, and I have the pleasure to serve as the chair of the University Staff Council for the 2019-2020 academic year. If you would please give a warm welcome to Dr. C.G. Woods, Associate Vice President and Chief of Staff in the Office of the President.
Thank you, Annie. Howdy and good morning. All right. I've been here long enough, so that just kind of rolls off now. I was at a conference and folks started with howdy, and they looked at me like, this guy is standing up here saying howdy. It's like, I was like, when you work at Texas A&M for about 13 years, just become part of what you do. So again, I'm C.J. Woods, and I will be doing introductions this morning. It's my privilege to welcome you to the Spring Leadership Panel hosted by the University Staff Council. The University Staff Council is comprised of many representative units, which spans from our main campus, the Health Science Center, our Galveston campus, McAllen campus, Cutter, the College of Dentistry, Texas A&M Law School, and other areas throughout the university. The USC, as is popularly known, represents the collective voice of our staff and is charged with helping our staff to engage our university leadership in a consistent and clear manner so they can provide feedback. So last year, you all had the honor of having President Young. This year, they have expanded the panel to discuss goals, challenges, and opportunities for staff at Texas A&M. And as you know, if you do something more than once at Texas A&M, what is it? It's a tradition, exactly. So looks like this is going to be happening pretty regularly, which I think is a very good thing. I am honored to introduce our panelists today. I have had the opportunity to work with them individually in their capacity, and I must say they are true professionals, and they make our jobs a lot easier here at the institution because they know what they're doing. After I briefly introduce our panelists, they will have an opportunity to share what they do specifically day to day in the areas that they're responsible for. After that, we'll ask them to talk about new initiatives or areas of opportunity they are tackling in the months ahead. And finally, we're going to open the floor up for Q&A. It is a moderated Q&A, so you'll present your questions and they will be read and our panelists will respond. So please, if you have some pressing questions, be thinking about it and be ready to engage when that opportunity presents itself. So now for our panelists. First is Dee Childs. All right. Dee serves as the Vice President for Information Technology and Chief Information Officer at Texas A&M University. She leads Texas A&M's enterprise IT strategy in alignment with the University Vision 2020 strategic plan. Now, I know that sounded very impressive. Just let me say, she's a big deal, all right? Next, we have Jennifer Smith. She is subbing for Kevin McGinnis. Mr. McGinnis serves as our Chief Risk, Ethics, and Compliance Officer at Texas A&M. But Ms. Smith serves as our Assistant Vice President and Title IX Officer here at Texas A&M. In her capacity, she leads OREC, which is responsible for responding to alleged violations of rules, regulations, policies, and procedures and ethical misconduct, ensuring that issues are appropriately handled and resolved. Enough said about that. And then finally, Dr. Jeff Reisinger. Jeff is the Vice President for Human Resources and Organizational Effectiveness here at Texas A&M. In his role, he is the principal steward for identifying and enhancing the university's human capital, promoting Texas A&M as an employer of choice, and helping us retain and recruit the very best talent to advance the university's mission. I must say, again, you all have a stellar panel today. Please engage them when you have the opportunity to do so. And I just want to say thank you all for taking the time to be here today. I will now turn it over to Dr. Reisinger to lead the discussion. Okay.
Well, howdy. I'm Jeff Reisinger, Vice President of HR. I have been here almost a year now. April 1st will be my one-year anniversary. There were all kind of jokes when I started on April Fool's Day, and it's worked out okay so far. So I'm very glad to be back at Texas A&M. I was here many years ago as a student at the Mays Business School, and it's different as a student versus the role that I'm in now. But I think all of us share in common the opportunity to work at one of the greatest places on earth. I was actually in a local store the other day. One of the things you get to do when you go to eat out or do other things around College Station is you get to meet a lot of our students because a lot of times they're employed there. And I was talking to one who had taken some advanced classes in high school. I think he was a junior now, but because he had taken advanced classes in high school, he was only going to be here 3 years. And he was really disappointed. He said, now I hate that I did that because I get one less year in the greatest place on earth. And so when our students see it that way, certainly we should see it that way. But we have a lot of work to do each and every day to make sure that it is that way. It's not an ideal or perfect place by default. It's because of the work that we do together. And one of the greatest responsibilities that I have is I get to work directly with the leadership of the University Staff Council in all of the programming that you all pursue and programs from the past. I wasn't here when a lot of these things happened, but a lot of good things that we do today as a matter of routine were ideas that started from the University Staff Council. Appreciation Week, we'll talk a little bit more about that later. The wellness program, a lot of these ideas. In fact, there was when I first got here, it's like every good idea that came up when I was given the history was right here with the staff council, that it was suggested, a thought, something that turned into a project, and then it became just the way, it became one of those traditions, just the way we do things. As far as HR goes, part of working in the greatest place on earth is that I have a great team that I get to work with every day. And they do tremendous work across campus. You all know, and I've talked at HR liaison meetings yesterday about this, we had some challenges with our benefits team over the summer. And I saw a group of HR professionals that rallied around that problem and completely rebuilt that team. And we've got a tremendous group of benefits professionals now that take care of you each and every day. A number of other things that we're getting to do that are new for us. The president has entrusted us with one of his most significant initiatives, and that is Flourish. And he tells me nearly every day, do you have what you need? Do you need anything from me? That is so important to him, that everything that you see coming out of Flourish is his direct commitment to you and your quality of life and the quality of work life that you have in your career. We've got a couple of initiatives that I'll probably go into more detail when we get to questions, because I suspect there might be some questions about it, but a couple of really significant new endeavors around leadership effectiveness at Texas A&M and the opportunity to grow and develop careers at Texas A&M. I am very disappointed in the success rate that we have at promoting people from within. I've looked at those numbers. They're way too low. There should always be a balance with internal and external hiring, but we're way out of balance in terms of that right now, and some of the strategic initiatives that we're pursuing are designed to address that very issue. So a lot of good things going on in HR. Again, we have been given the opportunity to contribute to the overall strategic plan of the university. And we did that with an eye towards staff and kind of what can we do for our staff to make this an even better place to work. And CJ mentioned one of my responsibilities is to advocate for that. We've never really had a formal disciplined way of measuring that, but we will, going forward as a result of the new strategic plan, be participating in great universities to work for through the higher ed, the Chronicle of Higher Ed. And through that, we will, it ceases to become a phrase. It starts to become a set of measures and a set of activities where we're held accountable for really proving that we're a great place to work. It's easy to give speeches about that. It's much harder to roll up your sleeves and make that the case with some outside peer review that agrees with you. So a lot of our work will continue to revolve around those things. And I personally think that the quality of leader that you have and the belief and hope that you have in growing your career here are the two key things that make this a great place to work. And we're dedicated to that. Some of you may have heard me say this before. I was at a conference not too long ago, and the issue of wellness came up and how all these employers are talking about wellness and what they can, and well-being and what they can do to make a difference there. And the speaker that was presenting presented a survey that was done recently and said that when people think about stress in their lives, 74% of the stress in their life comes from their job. And so the speaker looked at us and said, you all are trying to solve this wellness problem, and you are the problem. And it made the point that if you're not focused on the quality of the work environment, the quality of leadership, the hope and dreams you have for your career, if that's not front and center for someone, we're not going to solve that problem with health screenings and the other things that we do. We got to get really deeper into those issues, and that's what we're working every day to do. So I'm glad to be here with you this morning, and I look forward to getting into more details when we get to the Q&A session. Thank you.
Well, good morning. It really is a privilege to be here, and I can't wait to hear some of your questions. But in the meantime, I think I'm supposed to introduce myself a little bit. So again, I'm Dee Childs, and I thought it might be important for you to know a little bit about my background, how I got here. I grew up in rural Indiana. I used to have dairy cows and bees. So when I got the opportunity to come to the best agricultural university and the best engineering university in the country, I thought I would fit right in. It's definitely part of my background. I did study at Indiana University and did study not initially computer science, but philosophy. So I have kind of an interesting background. I'm also married. I have 3 children, and I have 6 beautiful grandchildren. So I'm a pretty busy lady, but I feel like I have a balanced life, in part thanks to Jeff. I'm learning how to balance my life a little bit better. I'm a big Aggie football fan. I go to every single game that's in town and follow the Ags, have learned the war hymn. Like at first, I thought, what is that? But I quickly learned the words. I'm really into football. Another thing about me is that I love the outdoors. So I did, again, come from an agricultural background, but I used to do sprint triathlons and half marathons. Now I've slowed down a bit, but I'm an avid scuba diver, so just love the outdoors. So something else to know about me besides what I do in IT. So I'm the head of a great organization, and like Jeff said, part of the beauty of being here and part of the beauty of just being part of a great organization is the pleasure and honor and privilege of having so many great employees. Most of them are smarter than me. Maybe you shouldn't tell them that, but that's the truth. They're smarter than me, and so they really help do all the things that we need to do for you. So you wonder about IT, like what is it? You sort of know. You know how almost everybody has a computer, I'm sure, on their desktop. So you know some things, but a lot of what we do is a little bit mysterious because you've probably heard the word infrastructure, and you sort of kind of think you might know what that is, but in reality, you don't know what it is because nobody ever explains it. So I'm going to explain it just a little bit, but I've only got 5 minutes, so I'm going to rush right through that. So one of the things that we call infrastructure is better known as, I like to call it, the Research and Education Network. Why? Because that's what we do at this university. We do research and we do education. I could also call it the Student Network, because in reality, the students use our network as much or more than our researchers, faculty, and staff. But to give you an example of how big we really are, and you know Texas A&M is big, we have 180,000 wired network ports on our network. We support over 8,000 Wi-Fi hotspots. On any given day, there's 100,000 people using Wi-Fi. And think about this, I mean, students are now bringing 6 or 7 devices with them. It's their laptop, their gaming, their watch, their iPad. So the students are really, really heavy users of our IT infrastructure because they're very, very tech savvy, and we want to be able to support that. Also on game day, since I happen to know some stats about that, so in addition to the normal 100,000 people or so that we're serving on Wi-Fi, we've got another 100,000 people using the athletics Wi-Fi on game day. So those are big numbers. We're a big campus, and that's a lot of what we do. We also have the campus data center. So that's important because it means that your information, your personal information, what you do and your social security numbers and anything about you is completely secure in our data center. We're very confident of that, but we also have in there the entire banner environment for our students and a lot of other resources that our business units as well as our student units are taking care of. So many different hundreds, if not thousands, of applications across campus that are hosted through the data center. So that's part of our infrastructure. We do a lot more than that, though. We're really here to support the teaching and learning mission of the university, student success, research, impact. We're almost $1 billion research university. So a lot of what we do are both individual and more large environments for supporting research. And we're also, of course, very concerned that about doing the right thing. Not everybody comes to college with the same kind of capabilities. Everybody's different, and some of our students are disabled, or they might have vision impairment or not be able to hear as well in the classroom as other students. And so part of my office houses an accessibility IT environment. And so a lot of what we do, again, is kind of in the background, but we're constantly looking at the university websites, both the main website and individual college and academic websites, to make sure that those websites are accessible, especially for our students, but for anyone in the entire world who might be coming to look at Texas A&M. We want those websites to be completely accessible, as well as all the applications, as well as devices. If a student enrolls here, let's say in biology, and they're using some kind of microscope, or they're using, instrumentation that will help them get their degree done, those also have to be accessible. So the accessibility part is a pretty big deal. So I know we don't have ever spend on this, and I'm trying to limit my remarks to 5 minutes. So let me just move to telling you about some of the new things that we're doing. So I'm going to talk about 3 big things and then maybe a couple little things. One is called, and we like naming things so it help you understand what it's about. So one is called the Aggie Innovation Platform. But what is the Aggie Innovation Platform? Well, you've heard of the cloud, and you may have heard, Amazon and Microsoft and Google all have these public cloud environments. And a lot of our researchers in particular would like to use those environments, but we have some extra burden on us to protect our student information, to protect HIPAA information, personal information about our health if you're going to the Butyl Health Center. And there's a lot of research that is conducted that has very sensitive information and intellectual property. So the Aggie Innovation Platform will be a multi-cloud approach, taking advantage of all of the great capabilities of these very large public companies that are well-funded and very innovative, but in a compliant, very safeguarded way. So that's the innovation, the Aggie Innovation Platform. Another thing we're setting up, which is kind of a sub-unit of the Aggie Innovation Platform, is the secure health research environment. So one of the things I should mention is that my unit also adopted, when Dr. Byington was here, she wanted us to move all the IT from the Health Science Center into the Division of IT so that she could help further the mission of the Health Science Center. So Health Science Center is also actually part of my organization, and so we're very forward-thinking about how we approach health-related research, telemedicine, and many of the new products that will be coming up with the NMED program. So we're building a secure health research environment to help the researchers out with those things. The next generation Aggie network. So again, we like to use the Aggie brand, why not? What does that mean? Well, our network, our data network that I talked about, is 10 years old, and most of the equipment on it is 10 years old. That's really just too old. In the meantime, enrollment has increased like 40%. We have, I don't know, dozens, if not hundreds of new buildings in that 10 years. And we've really just got to redesign the network. One of the important features, of course, of redesigning the network is cybersecurity. So it will be a design that will be flexible for our researchers to do the things they want while being secure, while protecting our privacy and confidential information, as well as protecting us from things like ransomware. The final thing I'm going to mention is just, it's small, but it's big. Does anybody like spam? Hold your hand up if you like spam. You do? She does. Okay. I think most of you didn't hold your hand up. Oh, food. Okay. Well, I was meaning the email kind, so we get, well, in spite of the fact, here's a stat for you, we block 12 million, actually it's closer to 13 million emails every week. There's 13 million emails that you never get because we've already blocked them before you get to inbox. So if you think, you know, on the one hand, if you think your inbox is bad now, if we didn't do that, it would be much, much worse. But we still realize that there's a problem with spam or just too many emails. So we're continuing to work on that. We have some new initiatives that we're going to run that will try to reduce a little bit of the clutter in your mailbox. So I thought everybody might be happy about hearing that one. And thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to your questions.
Howdy. So my name is Jennifer Smith. I'm here on behalf of Kevin McGinnis, our Chief Risk Ethics and Compliance Officer. He sends his regrets this morning, but I was delighted to be able to fill in. I actually got the call this morning on my way to work. Hey, by the way, you need to go to a different place this morning. So I'm going to share with you some thoughts, but I don't have all the details about some of the things that Kevin might know about. So you'll have to forgive me in some places. The Office of Risk, Ethics, and Compliance is involved with a lot of different things. We are responsible for all sorts of compliance, making sure that people follow rules in all areas of the campus, except for research compliance. We do not do that, academic research compliance. If Kevin were here this morning, he would tell you that what his job is to tell people to do the right thing and tell them to be good humans. And so with that, I'd like to tell you about some of the different areas that we work in. The first one is headed by John Pride, and that's our privacy division. We are making sure that the flow of HIPAA-protected data, of FERPA in some instances, is controlled, that only people that actually need this information have access to it. I think that John's work most recently has been focused on HSC as they are growing by leaps and bounds, and again, just trying to control access to that data. Some of you guys may know Jason Boyle. He heads up our insurance risk area. So anytime anyone files a claim against the university that we would be responsible or liable for the damages or any sort of negligence, he controls that. He also does university youth programs, which is interesting. Anybody here have a kid that goes to one of those camps in the summer? We offer lots of athletic camps, lots of academic camps. His job and his team, they work on making sure that our kids stay safe. I have a 15-year-old daughter that goes to those camps every summer, so I'm delighted that somebody is looking into it and making sure that we comply with the regs, that all the people that are coming to our campus to work at those camps in the summer, that they've had the appropriate training and that we've done background checks on all of those folks. The University Risk URC, that group also reports under OREC, and they do audit liaison services, they do enterprise risk management. I'm like, what does all that mean? What they do is when the system comes in and they want to do an audit of one of our areas, they identify risk areas. And they work with the folks that work in that department to identify their own risk areas, and then they identify goals, and everybody works together as a team to make sure that we are identifying our biggest areas of risk and then putting a plan in place to address those areas. And it's interesting, sometimes it's just a matter of communication. One part of the department doesn't want to talk to the other part of the department. Somebody doesn't want to fess up that maybe this is an area that needs some attention on it, and so it's really great to have an outsider come in and work with all the relevant parties to reduce our risk. Our ADA coordinator is also part of URC, and that has taken a really big role on campus in the last several months. Now when an employee requests an accommodation, it first goes to the supervisor, hopefully, and the supervisor will forward that to the HR liaison, and then it gets forwarded to some folks in Jeff's team, the employee relations team, and they do engage in the interactive process with the employee. They get their medical certification, see what the doctor's recommending. They visit with the employee to see what they're asking for, visit with the supervisor to determine what's feasible and reasonable and makes sense for the business aspect of what we do. And then if there is a conflict and we are going to deny an accommodation, it gets forwarded to the URC team, to the ADA coordinator, and they will pull everybody into a meeting and really drill down on what's reasonable and what's feasible. And then what I do is the civil rights part of our job. The Title IX office is part of the Civil Rights Division, but we handle any kind of allegations of abuse, discrimination, harassment based on a protected class. So age, disability, gender, national origin, race, veteran status, religion, any of those sorts of complaints get funneled to my office. We take a look at them. In some cases, we open an investigation. In some cases, we've been doing more and more informal resolutions where we just let somebody know that their language or their actions are offensive and maybe they need to think about that and not continue doing that, because it is going to become a civil rights violation if they persist in that activity. And then also Clary is our last area under OREC. Clary gathers and publishes data with respect to crimes that occur on our campus. One of their biggest challenges lately has been the expansion of Clary geography. There are very specific maps, and it's not just up to the curb of our campus, but sometimes it includes the area around our campus. There's some new federal regulations that say if our students are there for more than 2 nights, that's part of our geography. So when we have students that are traveling abroad and they spend more than 2 nights in a hotel in Italy, for example, we now have to report crime statistics for what's going on in that little tiny town in Italy. So there have been a lot of challenges with Clary lately. All right, well, I think that's it.
Thank you all for those introductions and some insight into what's happening in each of your units and divisions. I am going to do some housekeeping and reminders before we open up the floor for questions for each of you. Note that you may have questions today that maybe might not be in our panelists' area of experience or expertise. Please forward those questions or concerns to staff@tamo.edu, and the University Staff Council will make sure that those get forwarded on to those who can address those questions. The surveys that we handed out, if you would fill those out, we appreciate that feedback. Leave those on your chairs at the end of our panel. And then lastly, we are having a reception at the behind this room when we've concluded the panel. All right, if we are ready for our first question.
Ms. Smith, there have been big changes in regards to legislation in the state of Texas in terms of risk and compliance. Can you share with us some of the changes that are in the works?
Sure. There have been big changes to mandatory reporting. I've spent a lot of time in the fall semester and again the spring semester talking to every group that will have me. If you would like to have a presentation for your department, please shoot me an email and we'll get something set up. The reason that it's so important that folks know about the changes in mandatory reporting is that there are new criminal sanctions in addition to university penalties for failure to mandatory report. And what I'm talking about is allegations of discrimination or harassment based on a protected class, specifically gender, but also the other protected classes as well. Failure to make one of those mandatory reports results in automatic termination from your job. It does supersede your tenure rights if you're faculty, and the university doesn't have any choice about that. In the past, we were able to discipline employees in other ways, perhaps get them more training if we thought it was an inadvertent, unintentional failure to report. Maybe we could dock somebody's pay, send them home for a couple of days from work without pay. We are no longer able to do that. By law, we now have to terminate people who don't make a mandatory report. So it's important that your people understand what it is that they have a duty to report, because there's some very clear parameters on the things that have to be reported. In addition to the university sanction of being terminated from your job, there are also criminal penalties now. You can be fined up to $4,000 for failure to make a mandatory report, and there's also an up to 1 year jail term for an intentional failure to report. So very, very important that folks are aware of these changes in the law.
Anyone from our audience has questions, just raise your hand and the mic runners will get to you. In the meantime, Dr. Reisinger, can you provide an update on what the new Staff Appreciation Week is going to look like for the year under Flourish?
Yeah, well, my answer won't be as scary as Jennifer's was. I can promise you that. One of the things we're trying to do, we have had Staff Appreciation Week here at Texas A&M for a while, and we started hearing, getting feedback, hearing kind of complaints a little bit last year about there was so much packed into 1 week that people didn't get to participate in everything that they would like to, because there were just so many things going on. And it really didn't make sense to us that we only express appreciation in that way 1 week, even though we know we appreciate staff every day. Recognizing that was kind of being concentrated into this 1 week. So we decided to do a lot of the things that we still do that week, and we've had some announcements that come out that talk about the things that are happening with Flourish, not only in the month of March, but in that April timeframe, the President's Award program that we'll continue to do, encouraging department and divisions to do the unique things that they have always done. But then we're adding many, many other activities and events throughout the year. And all of that will come under the umbrella of Flourish. Staff appreciation is a component of the Flourish program, and the kinds of announcements like what you saw come out yesterday, I think, or the day before, you'll see on a regular basis. Events, activities, just more and more things to do. We'll be moving to a phase of Flourish soon where we invite everybody on campus that has an idea that connects to staff appreciation to develop that idea, get funding for that idea through Flourish, and we don't even know what those things will be yet. So we know a lot of what we're going to be doing and be doing throughout the year. Some of the things we don't even know yet because they're still in your mind as an idea, and it just has yet to surface. But we do want, when it comes to kind of how we're measuring Flourish, we want a measure we've put in place is that we want 85% of our activities to be, we call them organic, to come from our people, our staff's ideas, and not ideas that we get from the outside. So many things that you are seeing are a part of that appreciation throughout the year, And many things we haven't even thought of yet will be funded and become a part of that.
Dr. Reisinger, this is for you again. So in regards to flex, comp, awarded administrative leave, also wellness release time, what is happening to really bring equity across the campus? Some departments do it, some don't, and so I'd just
Yeah.
like to hear what is happening at the university level.
Yeah, so what typically happens now is that, we have policies that we communicate out, and you're right, they get implemented in often inconsistent ways. And sometimes that's a function of a lack of understanding on the part of a supervisor or leader, and we can continue to communicate and help with that. Sometimes it's a difference of opinion between leaders, and some support an idea and some don't. And I think in those cases, we have to, it becomes almost a case-by-case kind of issue. When we have a problem, we have to dive into that. I think we can do a lot more in terms of an HR organization, looking at consistencies in what we see happening across the university, and be a little more proactive in saying, we don't see a lot of this happening here versus here, and just continue that education process. And also make sure that staff members know we can be a help in facilitating inconsistencies when they experience that. I think bigger than that, I think there's a kind of a philosophy shift that we need to have around things like wellness release time. A lot of areas are very accepting of that, and they let that flourish, if you will. And some people kind of know that, I really shouldn't ask for that because it's not going to be supported. And I think one of the things we have to shift, and I'll give you an example of this from my past, but one of the things we have to shift is, instead of making employees ask for, can they use that time, supervisors really should be talking to employees about why they're not using that time, to change the philosophy, to make it not a please may I kind of approach. But this is something the university has decided is important, and it matters to people's lives, their wellness, their well-being, and why should we add the added stress of you having to ask in such a way where you don't know if it's going to be okay or not. Years ago, I worked in Washington, D.C., and there was a real push to encourage telework. A very congested city, traffic issues, environmental issues, and there was a real push for that. And the same kind of thing happened where I worked, where there was a policy that said, okay, people, maybe should consider teleworking a day a week or a couple days a month. But the informal communication was, don't really ask for that, because people that ask for that are viewed a certain way. And so in my office, knowing that undercurrent of culture was there, I made it mandatory that everybody has to telework 1 day a week, unless you come and say, I hate that, please don't make me do it. And it totally changed the dynamic. I think we need to do something like that, at least with wellness release time. Now, the comp time and other issues have a little more administration around it and how it's utilized. But things like wellness release time that's provided for everybody, that's well-defined, we really have to work, I have to work on making sure that it begins to feel like if I'm an employee and I'm not taking advantage of that, I've got a caring supervisor saying, you really should take advantage of this, instead of the way it is now where you cross your fingers and you're concerned in some cases. Some cases we've got very great support of that. But I know in other cases it's you hesitate to ask, and we've got to change that dynamic.
Good morning. I'm from the School of Public Health, so I will say that my comments are obviously very biased, but I first want to say thank you for what you just said. I think it's great to have a leader that actually believes that and will seemingly, make the rubber meet the road when it comes to literally the things that you just said. But if we could dive a little bit more into a couple of those areas, again, being from the School of Public Health, and one of the things we do is studying interventions on populations and how that actually affects things. I would hope that things like Flourish and Wellness Release and, those sorts of things actually prove out to be valuable to the organization in terms of data, in terms of healthier people. As a self-insured health plan, fewer sick days, healthier employees that are thus more productive. Two questions, one related to that and then one kind of unrelated to that, but just general benefits. The first one being not to oversimplify and say if some is good, more is better, but if wellness release could be kind of a, I read it takes 21 days to form a habit, and the more people do things, the better it is. If wellness release could be moved from 3 days to 5. First question. Second question is, having been a system or university employee for nearly 10 years, and having been fortunate enough to be healthy, is there at some point where accrued sick time could roll over to vacation?
Yeah, so certainly, let me take the last question first. There are, we work in a system where a lot of our benefits are defined by the system, and we certainly have different committees and things that we're a part of where we can advocate for that. I've worked in a number of places, and I have seen that concept and see it be effective. It's not something, prior to your question, that I've thought much about, but we can put more thought into that and look for ways that we can influence that, knowing it's not directly our decision. It'll have to be a process of influence, but we can put more time into that. In terms of expanding wellness release, yeah, I think first we do need to get it as a standard practice and get everybody up to a certain level. And then I think it can be strongly considered. I have been looking at a lot of research lately that looks at work schedules in general, flexible work schedules. There are things that are being done, not just in Europe, even in the United States, around flexibility with work schedules that have been in place long enough now where productivity studies and other things can be done. And we're seeing that allowing flexibility in when people work and even how much they work to some extent is not declining productivity in organizations. These are mostly private sector companies where the bottom line means everything to them, and they're not seeing any harm done by thinking differently about work schedules in terms of when work occurs and just how much work we do in our lives. So I think there's an opportunity for us. A component of Flourish will be research and researching what we do, the effectiveness of what we do, as well as learning from research that others are doing. So I think we'll have an opportunity to continue to kind of push those boundaries in ways that make work life better and balance the needs of the organization. And again, a lot of good things are happening out there in the world around work schedules, flexible work schedules, time of work, and they're proving that absolutely nothing is lost, and in many cases a lot is to be gained by not just the employee experiencing that, but the place where they work as well. So you have my commitment that we will continue to be researching and looking at every opportunity to affect those issues, and where we have direct authority, we'll take that, and where we have to influence a broader system, we'll develop strategies to do that.
Good morning. I guess my question would include both of you eventually, but as you know, there are a lot of staff members who take it upon themselves to get additional education, get additional certification and training, which they pay for out of pocket and do all of, handle it that way. But my question is, you mentioned having discussions about promoting from within, and will those discussions include changes to the existing performance review process? And if so, what might that look like?
Good, that's a great question. So one of the two things that I mentioned earlier that I was really proud that we were able to get into the Texas A&M strategic plan is this idea that every employee will have a learning and growth plan. Now again, it'll be one of those things if an employee says, I don't want to learn and grow, we're not going to force that issue, but we're creating the expectation that everyone would have that. And we're doing a lot of work. Tara Gray, that works in HR and her organizational development team, is doing a lot of work to create career paths, competency-based programs, so that as you put together a learning and development plan, it certainly could be focused on the job you're in, and how you want to grow, but you could also have visibility into jobs you would like to have in the future, and be able to select very specific competencies and say, I want to be developed on this now, so that when that job's available, I'm ready. I've always said the worst time to find out that you're not qualified for a job that you want is when you apply for it. You should know that. You should have good dialogue between someone who knows and yourself long before the opportunity to apply comes. And we think these learning and growth plans will create the structure for that. And the outcome measure for that is that, and the only reason we're doing it is to increase that rate of internal promotion. Because you're right, there are ways, and compensation is a big issue. In every place I've worked, it's a big issue. And we do the best we can to do merit increases and other kinds of financial recognition. But our internal promotion rate right now is 14%. At least the last year's data showed that. There are a lot of dollars left on the table that could go to existing staff through promotion, probably bigger dollars than we talk about in terms of merit. And we were not doing enough to make sure that our staff are the best qualified for those jobs. I have every confidence in the world that our hiring managers are hiring the best people when they fill these jobs. But it's important to me to make sure I lead HR in a way that almost every single time the existing staff person is the most qualified. And so this learning and development plan will be a part of the performance management process so that we can formalize it. And we're setting expectations that, that leaders that have people who report to them have to fund and execute those plans. And we'll use various incentives to make that happen, but it's not something that we want in a Workday file somewhere that never gets seen again. We want it to really be serious, to be developed, to be implemented, and to see those internal promotion rates change. And I think that's the right tool to do it. And I think that our team in HR is building the infrastructure to make it happen. If you just see a title you'd like to have in the future and say, I'd like to grow to that job, but you know nothing else about it, we haven't helped you at all. But if we define that job in a way where you know the skills you need and we show you how you can get them, then I think we'll change those internal promotion rates.
This question is for Ms. Childs. Famous is the university's antiquated accounting software. Many new staff have a difficult time learning and understanding a DOS-based system and technology that is typically not used any longer. What measures are in place to look into updating our software to not only it being more efficient, but also user-friendly?
Okay. So, and that is specific to Famous, those?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so let me provide a little context about that question. So Famous is the, well, antiquated is one word, but just I think we prefer to call it legacy. Legacy being that it was written many years ago, and which was primarily the main way software was written. Big firms such as exist today didn't so much write enterprise software. Very common for universities to write their own student information systems, their financial systems, their HR systems. And as you know, recently the entire system collaborated on switching over a whole bunch of individual human resource programs to Workday. And you know, we all know that there were massive benefits of doing that, and then there were some challenges along the way. One thing that it's done, however, is homogenize that environment across the entire system so that some of the things that Jeff is talking about that are aspirational will also be aspirational for the entire system, because we actually have now a unified Workday system that maps to every member, which means not only can you be successful at Texas A&M University here, but also in Galveston, also if you switched over to an agency and so forth. So there's a lot of advantage in having that homogeneity across the entire system in terms of fairness and equity. It's also, of course, a lot easier for the university as a whole, university administration, to manage Workday in that way, or human resource in that way. So after that project, or let me just say there was some overlap, there was a great deal of consideration that went into looking at our other legacy programs, the primary one being FAMOUS, which is the financial management system, again, legacy system that was written many years ago here at Texas A&M and has served the university very well. The aspiration at the time was to look at a number of now commercially available software packages and try to select the right one for the university. And of course, Workday Financial was one of the programs that was looked at. Once that analysis was done, there was a leaning towards the Workday Financial, but at the end of the day, what it really turned out is to be a couple of different factors that dissuaded the system from moving to any of those commercial packages. One was simply the costs, and when I tell you what the costs are, I think you're going to find they're staggering, maybe staggering to a point where you're like not believing how expensive this stuff is. But the cost of moving to the entire system to a major commercial enterprise financial system was going to be around $140 million. So staggering amount of money. We are a big university and a big system. The cost of rewriting FAMOUS, but giving it sort of a new, not really a new look, but let me call it foundation, giving it a new foundation underneath, and the databases underneath, modernizing those, is about a $40 million project. So 3 times less expensive. Another consideration was that there's not going to be any financial package that we can go out on the marketplace and buy that is going to do everything that FAMOUS currently does. It might provide some new capabilities, but it's going to also provide different capabilities as well as different workflows that we're not currently accustomed to today. So you know, when we transitioned to Workday, a lot of people did have to change their workflow, and the decision was made fairly early on that we weren't going to, as a system, customize Workday very much at all. Like leave it the way that the manufacturer made it, and then change your workflows to map to it. So again, there's some pain associated with that. Over the long term, over the 10 or 12 years, or whatever the lifetime of Workday will be, we'll be better off not doing those modifications. But going back to sort of the central point, another reason why we decided not to go with a commercial package in addition to the cost was that all the workflows were going to have to change dramatically, and the university, between those two things and the potential for loss of functionality, just felt like that was going to be too dramatic of a change for the cost. So I think those are the primary reasons. I think what's going to happen, so the interface I don't think is going to be modernized. I mean, you're going to see the back end of it's going to be quite different and quite modern. The user interface is not going to be different, and that's intentional, and I can understand some people being disappointed in that. I think what you will see, however, is that many of the associated tools that you use, like Aggie and the tools that are used after the fact to do informed decision making from the databases that we derive information about our purchasing, for example, and our finances. Those will be modernized so that the associated tools with the FAMOUS core will be modernized in such a way that I think you'll be a lot happier with the speed and the capabilities. So I hope that was a helpful answer.
Thank you. We have several more questions in the audience, so we're gonna try to get to those as quickly as possible. If we go over, we can stay a little bit later. The reception is until 11:30, but at 10:30 we can open up the doors as well, and you're welcome to go to the reception. But I think we have quite a few more questions, so we'll try to get all of those in as quickly as possible.
I'd like to pose this question to all three of you to get a broad perspective on this, because I think you represent some very different leadership areas, and I'd like to hear about that. What, in your opinion, is the biggest barrier to staff development and enhancement that we face?
We're all looking at it.
So there's so many different areas of OREC. I'm trying to think about what the barriers would be in areas other than mine. I mean, there's always the big problem of time away from work when you assemble the whole department, trying to get leadership to focus on whatever it is that we want to talk about, and then getting everybody in the same room. Oftentimes I'm asked to do a mandatory reporting or talk about our consensual relationship rule, and I'll show up and there'll be 8 people. That's not a great use of my time. And so sometimes it's just trying to get everybody to focus on getting the whole department together at one time, or at least having 2 times so that people can choose between them, and then making it mandatory. The compliance stuff that we do is so important that people understand the rules. And so I think those are the biggest challenges.
Here's how I'm going to respond to that. I feel like one of the biggest problems and challenges in my area, but I don't think it's just my area, is not really embracing the incredible cultural, racial, ethnic diversity that we have access to, and that maybe we have some unintentional bias in our hiring practices, so that we have, Texas is an amazing state, a great state, but we want, on the one hand, we want to promote from within, but when we are faced with whatever job that we have open, we also should at the same time be open to every diverse aspect of someone's personality and skill set. And I really do feel very strongly that the more diverse teams that we have, that we bring so much more thoughtfulness to the table, and having a monolithic approach to anything is not going to lead us into a future of innovation. I think where innovation happens in IT, for example, is people who are thinking out of the box and who are not thinking the same way I'm thinking. I want new and fresh ideas, and I think the only way to get that, the best way to get that, is to be really, really open. So I'll tell you one way that I hope that I am, or a couple ways that I hope I am trying to facilitate that is internally we have a mentorship program, and the mentorship program pairs, it doesn't necessarily pair people of different levels, it pairs anybody who wants to be paired. So co-mentoring, mentoring of people in different positions. I mean, I think we can all help be thought leaders and mentors for one another, as well as people of different profiles, if you will, in leadership and management. The other thing is, in my group, I have embraced different alternate work location and alternate work capabilities that are available to us by policy. So we always follow the policy, but we've been very successful in this way of being able to accommodate some people who live in Houston. So they live in Houston or they live in Dallas, but we don't require them to be on campus 5 days a week, and and we have some flexible time relationships too. I think that really helps out with working parents. So I'm really experimenting with those ways also to be more inclusive and of diverse people living in diverse places.
I would say just quickly, I agree, time is the first barrier that you face. And then I think beyond that, I think it's focus, and those two kind of relate to each other. If we, a lot of people, when we do things that would be considered development, kind of roll their eyes because they've already had that, it's not meaningful to what they want to do. So having more opportunities that are focused on what's important to staff as they're developed, I think will make sure that always utilizing that scarce time that we have is utilized as best that it can be. And then there's this old saying that we have to be on the right side of. One thought is, what happens if we spend a lot of money developing people and they leave? And the other side is, what happens if we don't and they stay? And we have to be willing to invest time in people, knowing that their next best opportunity may not be here, but in many cases it will be, and just take that risk.
Hello. I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you for the incentive to support staff to continue their education. The assistance, tuition assistance program, I think is great. And if I would have started 22 years ago, I would have had a PhD by now. But anyway, I wanted to address kind of what they were talking about, the equity on the staff that are able to take advantage of the health and wellness program, even attending events like this. At the university level, the leadership level at the top, what are they doing to understand workload in different units? Like, for instance, I've been in the same unit for 18 years. It's grown from 400 majors to 1,600 undergraduate majors. You know, how is it evaluated, the workload of those staffs in that unit, and how does that relate to whether or not those staff in that unit can take advantage of those programs? An example, the staff that work in my unit, they were dressed to go walking, and I encourage them. And before we knew it, we looked at the clock, and it was 5 o'clock because the phone's ringing, and that might be part of the problem why not all staff can take advantage of those things, because some of us, especially your long-term employees. And I have to say that most of the time, your best staff, you don't notice the workload increase because they're so good at what they do.
Right.
I've got some staff that they can remodel the whole building and no one even knows it's going on because they do such a good job. And then, as a supervisor, I encourage them to take advantage of those programs to continue their education. I want them all enrolled in classes next semester. But, it's the workload in the unit that has changed in the last 18 years that I've been in it.
Yeah.
And I think we had one increase in staff support.
Yeah.
So
I think that's the underlying problem, is that the growth in certainly students and to some extent faculty has been disproportionate to the growth in staff. And as we did the different forums that were done, that the provost held for the strategic plan, that issue came up every single time about making sure that we create visibility into, if you're going to grow a program by X number, what are the staff implications for that? And one of the assignments that's come out of that strategy work is for us to do some benchmarking with other universities on staff levels, and to ultimately create some kind of a ratio that says if you grow a program by this many students, it means this many more faculty, but don't forget the staff side, it means this many more staff. And I know as we do that, we're going to see that there's a huge gap there, and we need to, as quickly as you can in a university setting, pay attention to that and try to bring those ratios up to where they should be.
And if you don't mind, I'm going to comment on it because there is actually an IT perspective to this as well. In these days of modern technology, we do have opportunities. I'm not saying that we have been successful to date, but I think we can shape the future by thinking a little bit differently about our workflows, and in particular, I mean automation. So the new students that are coming in today, quite frankly, they don't look at websites anymore. And they're probably all the knowledge bases that we've built have a lifetime of maybe 1 or 2 more years, and they're going to be obsolete. And I think we have to think very differently about our approach to especially, especially our new students, but also ourselves and our faculty. But the good news is there are technologies and that can help us manage some of this workload. So for example, chatbots or Alexa or Google Home, you know, there are technologies out there that help us automate some of the kinds of Q&A, for example, that we would normally handle by answering a phone. But why not technology enable us to take some of that off of the human load? You know, we have to be strategic in how we do it, and we have to have a workforce that creates that stuff in the beginning. But once created, it can be very successful to automate a lot of the tasks that we now do manually. So I think the university does need to think very differently and plan for a different kind of future, especially for our students. Mm-hmm.
For when we get a lot of advising calls like all the time, and we were like, well, can't we have a message on there if you need to talk to advising, push 1, so and so.
Absolutely.
It's not allowed, and it's not up to the staff. It depends on who the department head is and the faculty and how they want to represent the department. As an academic unit, they don't want parents or people answering, you know, they want a human voice support, you know, so it's just not up to the staff all the time to make improvements. You know, we're kind of servants and, you know, not in a bad way, but anyway, thank you.
Absolutely.
Hi, Mr. Springer. I wanted to piggyback on some of the questions in regards to staff development. I come from, I worked in San Diego at the San Diego Community College about 10 years ago, and they had what we call sabbatical for staff, just like how faculty got sabbatical. And this was to enhance the faster growth in continuing their education. So what they did was in the San Diego Community College, for 6 months, they can do 6 months or a year sabbatical, and within 6 months, they get their full salary and the sabbatical, and for the year, they got half their salary with a commitment to the college of 3 years after they've finished their degree. Do you think that's something that we can do here, where staff can faster finish their education instead of trying to take one class every year and they're doing their education for 10 years instead of trying to faster grow their education?
Yeah, certainly something we can look at. That obviously that would take there's a huge cost to that would have to be planned for. But I'd love, if you want to send me the outline of that program, I'd love to take a look at it and find ways like that. So that's specific to if someone's getting a degree. I think the other things we have to think about in terms of staff development, a whole lot of staff development can occur that's not in a conference room or a classroom. And being smart about team assignments and people being able to, you know, an initiative starts that may not be associated with the job they're in now, but there can be something they gain from that, and allowing time for that is important too. But I would love to look at that program you're describing.
Yeah, and it was done as a lottery, so it wasn't like everyone, they probably had 2 slots every year for, you know, for
I
that.
don't see why we couldn't do something like that with parameters on it.
This is for whoever wants to answer it. It doesn't matter. But I know that this might not be the same for the rest of the university, but the College of Engineering has a new, I guess, policy that you could call it. All new buildings and renovations will have an open office area, which basically means cubicles for all staff. What are your thoughts on this, and as it relates to, I guess, satisfaction, productivity? Is the whole university going to be moving to something like this?
I can't see the whole university moving to something like that, because if you're building something new, it's easy to do it a certain way. If you're having to rebuild something old, it's much different. I can tell you just my personal opinion is I don't like those ideas. I think that there have been some experiments that I know of several cases where companies have done that. They've retrofitted a space, done that for a few years, only to go back and put it the way it was before. Others are seeing something of value or they wouldn't do it, but my personal experience has been that there are ways to create collaborative spaces where people can be together. That's not an all or nothing kind of approach like this. So you know, that's again just my opinion. I think looking for creative ways to have space to work together while at the same time preserving that personal space that people value too is important.
In some ways, I kind of wanted to piggyback on that, but thank you guys for everything for being here and for all the information that you've shared. My question is kind of how do we level the playing field? Because Jeff, you talked about it a little earlier where there's some cases where there's leadership that is totally on board with a lot of the procedures and the practices of the university, the good ones, and then some leadership are like, this is not going to happen, or we don't have the time for that, we don't have the human resources to be able to do some of those things that in your opinion is more beneficial than harmful to the university in most cases. So how do you guys engage leadership to change their shift and their way of thinking, you know, to kind of understand how beneficial some of these programs are to the staff and for them to see the advantages and not the disadvantages of those things?
Yeah, I think the best approach is just to continue to communicate. My style is never to go in with a hammer and tell somebody they must do something. But any of these things we've talked about that are good for you are also good for the institution. And I think the more that we can, where we have those pockets of resistance, the more we can demonstrate that, you know, other parts of the university are doing this and it's effective, and kind of use a persuasive or influence strategy versus a mandatory compliance kind of thing, we're better off. Not that in some cases you won't end up saying, hey, you know, stop being a hurdle in this particular issue. I think it's better to take that approach. The other thing that happens over time, it's slower, but you know, A&M is of such a size that there's an internal labor market. And if you're a leader that's not progressive and not doing these things while other leaders are, there will be movement of talent, and that will become apparent. That's not the ideal way to do this, but that will happen. One other thing that we're doing with this whole best places to work thing, in places I've worked before where we were compared to external places in terms of rankings as the best place to work, you get a little bit of movement with that. People pay a little bit of attention to that. But when you bring that idea inside, again, Texas A&M is a large place. If we're not just looking at are we a best place to work relative to other universities, but where is the best place to work at Texas A&M? And if we create kind of a friendly, competitive environment, if there's one thing that all of our leaders are, they're competitive. And if we give them something like that that's positive, that builds positive attitudes, and they see that ranking come out every year and they're near the bottom, somebody's always going to be near the bottom because that's just the way rankings go. But I don't care if someone's in last place, as long as last place is better this year than it was last year, as long as everybody's moving in the right direction. And we can use tools like that where wellness release time and other things are a part of how you determine a best place to work at Texas A&M, and then have that friendly, competitive atmosphere drive that. I think those things make more sense. At the end of the day, if they don't work, sometimes you have to say this is a mandatory issue, but you don't start there.
Thank you. We're going to have one more question, and then we will wrap things up and then head to our reception.
Last but not least, I manage the dual career program for the Office of the Dean of Faculties. And of course, it's faculty-based, in which we're assisting new faculty potential and existing in the recruitment process. They're already here. We assist the partners with employment opportunities within the area. Again, this is faculty-based. Are there any plans to do something that would be staff-based, so that certain positions or some positions or all positions that are staff positions would be able to have resources
as they are either moving into the area or taking on different roles, and their partners are, people have life-changing events, marriages, divorces, whatever the case may be, and their partners may need assistance with trying to find employment. Is there anything in the future that we're looking at for staff?
We haven't looked at that yet. I think it's a great idea. In our office, we've been the benefit of the program that you do lead. We've got someone that works on our team now that's been very good.
Yes, she was my client.
For us. Good, good. When I heard about that program, I wondered if it included staff when I first got here. I know that it doesn't, but I think it would.
It doesn't, but because of the leadership of Dr. Lupiani, she has allowed me to assist staff, postdoc, grad students, and basically anyone who needs assistance. Because if we hold the students to the core values, then as employees, staff members, and faculty, we too should uphold. So that's why we don't turn anyone away.
I think it's a great idea. I think we should look for ways to expand it. I think we should also look for ways to, where we know there are progressive companies in Austin and Houston and Dallas that support a telework environment, find out about those career opportunities where someone that is here we can extend our influence, because a lot of organizations are doing just what Dee was talking about with her staff earlier, and it doesn't just have to be positions at Texas A&M that we're promoting, but we can look for other ways of building connections and being a pipeline of talent to the areas around us as well. So I'd love to talk with you more about that.
Absolutely, because that's where we've branched out. It's not just A&M, but it's within the Bryan College Station area, as well as we have placed people in Texas, in Houston, Texas, and in Austin, but I'm the only person doing that, so I wouldn't suggest everyone trying to do that. But I really think that with as much staff as I see request that, it may be something that staff could benefit, just having some resources.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
I want to thank all of our audience members for contributing their questions. I want to thank our panelists for being here this morning. With that, we are concluded with our spring forum. Please join us in the back for some breakfast-type snacks and beverages. And please leave your survey on your chair. And if there were any questions that you still have a burning desire to be answered, please send those to staff@tama.edu, and the University Staff Council will make sure that those get to the appropriate individuals. Thank you so much, and gig 'em.